What's up guys, Neverness to Everness is 5 days away from launch. You're interrupting me out here at my piano practice, but today we're going to talk about one of the most important things that I think you need to learn as the game is coming closer and closer to release, and that is the elements in this game and the Esper Cycle system. So on release we've got 6 elements to work with. We've got Anima, Incantation, Chaos, Psych, Lakshana, and Cosmos. Using these 6 elements, we're able to trigger all sorts of different effects. We're going to get into those effects, but first we have to talk about how you trigger them because it's not the same as in other games. So in other games, you use your ability that applies that stat, and then you switch characters, you use their ability, and it causes an effect, right? However, in Neverness to Everness, we've got a little bit of a different system. You see this little bar down here that's full? That is our Esper meter. Right now it's full for Nonali, it's full for Daffodil, but if we look at Bai Cheng, his is empty. How do you charge up this meter? Great question. So if we take a look at our character's abilities, for example, Nonali's basic attack, and you go in here to attribute, you can see down here her cycle rate. The cycle rate is the rate at which you fill up this gauge. Once this gauge fills up for your character, it then allows you to perform their intro attack, or like if you're familiar with Wuthering Waves or whatever, like you do your intro attack or your outro, whatever. But the way you apply your Esper Cycle element in this game is by doing your swap in attack. So for example, if we wanted to apply Hexed onto the enemy, we would need to have a charged up Anima as well as a charged up Incantation. And I'm going to show you guys how that works real quick. Quick interruption, if you're enjoying these Neverness to Everness videos, a subscription would be greatly appreciated. We're like 150 subscribers off of 1,000 subscribers. If I hit 1,000 subscribers before the game's release, I'm going to be buzzing my head live on stream on release day. That'll be fun. We're also giving away a copy of Nonali on release day, as well as a couple battle passes and daily passes, so come to the live stream for that. Let's have a good time celebrating together. Back to the video. So we're going to lead this fight with Bai Cheng. As you could see, Bai Cheng's gauge down in the bottom left next to his health bar is slowly charging up. That's due to his cycle rate, which is gained via his basic attacks and his abilities. I just got hit. That's embarrassing. Now that Bai Cheng's Esper Cycle gauge is completely charged up, you see how the portraits are glowing for Nonali or Daffodil. We're going to swap into Nonali. Now that applies Hexed. So you want to charge up these meters in order to swap in and out. So right there, we were able to show off an instance of doing the Anima and Incantation in order to trigger Hexed. In order to get off those big three cycle bursts onto the enemy, it's got to be stronger enemies. On those small enemies, it's not really going to give those giant bursts like you're able to on a boss, for example. But yeah, you charge up your Esper Cycle meter down here in the bottom left. Once that's charged up, the attack deals a big burst of damage as well as applying the Esper attack, which applies your element in order to deal the Esper Cycles. Now we've got 8 different Esper Cycles we're able to apply. We're going to go over those real quick. If you link Anima and Incantation, you deal Hexed. Hexed deals an additional instance of follow-up damage to the target equal to 20% of Anima and Incantation damage that they take within 12 seconds after the cycle is triggered. This could deal a huge burst of damage if you're just pumping out Anima or Incantation damage. Then we've got Nova, which is triggered with Chaos and Psych. You inflict Nova on the target, and then 5 seconds after triggering that cycle, it deals a big massive burst of mental damage. Then we've got Scorch, which is Incantation and Chaos. It inflicts Scorch on the target for 15 seconds, which just deals damage over time. We love Dot. Then we've got one of the big 3 cycles, which requires Psych, Chaos, and Incantation. This deducts a percentage of the target's break when they are simultaneously affected by Nova and Scorch. That's going to be when you link Nova, Scorch together, they just receive a ton of break damage to their stagger bar. Then we got Blossom, which feels like a very basic one. It's triggered with Anima and Cosmos, which would be like Nonali and the main character, for example. Blossom generates 1 Lebensdamm, which shoots off a bunch of plants, and they deal damage to enemies in an area. And you can get up to 3 of these on the field at once. So you could essentially plant 3 little flowers on the field that just deal damage to the enemies. Pretty cool. And then we've got Stain, which requires Lakshana and Psych. Stain increases the target's Psych and Lakshana damage that they take by 20% for 12 seconds. So this just gives you a damage buff on the enemy that you're currently fighting. And then we've got Charge, which requires Anima, Cosmos, and Lakshana. Charge grants your active character 10 additional ultimate energy when Lobbin Blooms hit the target that is affected by Remora. So because you got Anima and Cosmos, you trigger the Lobbin Blooms, and because you've got Cosmos and Lakshana, you trigger Remora. And having these two different elemental cycles with Charge triggered causes you to generate a ton of additional ultimate energy. Lastly, we've got Remora, which links together with Charge. Remora is triggered by having Cosmos and Lakshana. The target enters Remora for 5 seconds after triggering the cycle, which slows down their movement and attack speed, and then it decays over time. Now we kind of understand the Esper Cycle system. You charge up your Esper Cycle meter, you apply different elements, and you get a bunch of different effects. Some of them are like trio effects, which will be huge to get the most out of these characters. And even some characters are really good at charging up their cycle meter. The main character, Esper Zero, is able to fully charge his meter every time he uses his ultimate. So you can imagine having Zero using his ultimate or her ultimate, getting a lot of Esper Cycle charge. You could get Blossom going, you could get Remora going, which will lead to charge, which will lead to more ultimates from the main character, Esper Zero. And then you could just repeat that process to deal a ton of damage. That's just one example of how that could work. But then we want to kind of min-max a little bit and take further advantage of the Esper Cycle system. And how do we do that, you might be asking? We're going to take a look at the character-specific Esper passives that are offered. Now, as we were scrolling through the different Esper Cycle effects, you might have seen character images. You might have stopped and read them yourself. Good on you. But if we take a look at the character portraits here, you've got different passives that you can unlock as you level up your characters. These passive effects are pretty huge. They could stack upon each other. So having your characters built and investing into these passives can help you further take advantage of this cycle and have even greater effects. For example, if you activate Nova and you've got Fadia's passive here, Furnace of Guilt, it enhances Nova and it drains 10% of Fadia's base max HP from the target at 5% efficiency when the Nova state ends. So this just increases the amount of mental damage that is taken by the enemy at the end of that 5 seconds and deals a big burst of damage. Now we could go over each of these passives, but we're not going to do that. I'm not going to hold you guys up here, but utilize these as you level up your characters. Implementing these passives and utilizing them will help you to deal further damage and take even more advantage of our characters. I mean, whether or not you just level up the passives and don't look at them, it's like you're going to deal more damage, but if you actually pay attention to what's going on, you could kind of build your team around how you actually want to play these characters and how you want to get the most out of your team. But yeah, that's the Esper Cycle system. It is a change from what we are used to in other gacha games. We're not just applying fire and ice to get melt. We're having to swap in the characters in order to apply these elemental effects. And then, yeah, we're having to learn whole new names. We got Anima instead of wind or whatever green would typically be. And then the blue element isn't water, it's psych. Red element isn't fire, it's incantation. We'll learn all these as we continue to play the game, and I hope you learned something here today. If you're enjoying these Neverness Everness videos, a subscription would be greatly appreciated. We're going to have a lot more coming before the game releases and way more once the game releases. I hope you guys are as excited as I am, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.